Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. As with me, as always, my trusted counterpart, Tony Tressel, all the way in Pomeroy, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tony.
Good day, everyone.
And joining us today from, I believe, somewhere in New Jersey is our good friend and arborist, Mr. Steve Chisholm. How are you doing today, Steve?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm assuming you are somewhere in Jersey.
I am in a little town called Jackson where I live, and it's in the dead center. For anybody from the tri-state area, you would know geographically right in the middle.
Right.
There's a place called Six Flags Great Adventure. So that is my hometown.
Okay. Well, we start all our episodes off with a question for our guests. So we get to hear an answer from all of our guests for at least one of the questions that's the same. And it's this question. Can you share with us the first memory that you have where you felt a connection to trees or a tree?
Ooh, the very first one. So I grew up in the tree business, and they were always around. Probably like one of my first ones, we had a dogwood. Obviously not a big tree by anybody's standards, but that was right at the top of our driveway, and we would climb that, and we had a couple of rope swings that my father had tied into an apple tree in the backyard. So those trees, we had boatloads of climbing experience. From the time we were probably 4.
Okay. Climbing a dogwood tree with a rope swing in it.
No, the rope swing was in the apple tree behind it.
Oh, sorry, the apple tree.
Yeah.
So was that, I'm curious, just because of the background, was there ever any friendly competition between you and your brother when it came to climbing the rope swing?
I don't know if it was friendly competition, but there was definitely competition. The one had a wooden piece of plywood seat in it.
Yeah.
And we used to like wind it and twist it up, and then you could like get somebody dizzy in it. And we had one particular time they spun it around and then flung it around and hit him in the head and sent him to the hospital with stitches. So that wasn't probably very friendly. Yeah.
And I know one of your brothers. I'm assuming I don't even know if you have other family members. Is it just the two of you?
It's just me and Mark. Yeah.
Okay. So you clunked Mark. You sent Mark to the hospital in stitches for stitches.
More than once, but that was with the tree. Yeah.
Yeah. I think anybody that grew up with a brother has stories of that type of thing happening. It's pretty funny.
Yep.
Well.
Yep.
And when we have arborists like yourself on the show, where they're generational, so that grew up in the business, so to speak. It's always interesting how they answer that question, because the first thing they typically say is that, well, they can hardly remember not trees being a part of themselves or part of life, right? They were just always there. It was the family business, so you would hear about trees all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, did you always plan to be part of the family business, do you think, Steve, or was it something that evolved for you, or how did you end up actually getting involved in trees?
Well, like you said, you're never not involved in trees because it's around you. So whether it was, dad, whether it was customers calling the house because the business phone, when we started it was in the dining room. So we had like a separate phone line. Back then, for those younger folks that don't understand this, there were actually wall phones, and they were rotary dial. So the green phone, because it was the 70s, was in the kitchen, and the green phone was the house phone. The white phone was the aspen tree phone. So when that one rang, Mom would answer that one separately. So you always had that. Obviously the guys, when they came in from work, would come in and hang out and have some snacks or barbecue or have beers and just sit around telling stories about the day. So you always had all of that going on. My first experience of actually going out and doing the work was probably about the age of 10. got out there, and mom kind of dropped me off with lunch for the guys and said, okay. I was given the job of raking because I was obviously, too young to do much else. So grabbed the rake. I was given real live, honest to God, greenbacks, real cash. So I was, of course, feeling mighty loaded at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so having my own spending money was cool at the age of 10, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Over time, you get to the 12 to 13 range, allowed to, chip brush. Got my first experience with climbing with an actual rope. So, it was taut
Yeah.
line hitch, typical old school, like Buckingham 2D rings,
Wow.
snapped in. That was pretty much it. My handsaw was kind of like what we call a battle axe. Now it was like 2.5 feet long. It looked like a carpenter's saw. Nothing like these nice, lovely silkies you use today.
Right, right, right. But I guess had you escaped to the painting cut stage of things?
I only saw the guys do it a few times way back then, so we didn't do a whole lot of the painting of the cuts. So some of that was just kind of transitioning out.
Interesting. And the family business thing, I think a lot of people, as businesses establish and develop, you've not everyone realizes or doesn't think about the fact that it started, you know, however it started. And for most companies in the tree care industry, and anyway, it starts as a family business and in the family home. There's as things grow, you eventually figure out you need to
Yeah.
have more places to park trucks and equipment, so you finally move out of the house. But um, it made me laugh. I've met your mother a few times, and just imagining her trying to wrangle you two while professionally answering the phone in the midst of whatever may have been going on in the kitchen must have been interesting at times.
Yeah, we had our own special playroom off the back, so she could always send us in the other room. Uh, and then, of course, the right time of year. Back in the day, we didn't have all the gadgets. We were outside, like, from pretty much as soon as you were done with breakfast, come back for lunch and play and come out to dinner, and then you'd still go back out until dark at the right time of year. So, I mean, we'd be outside riding bikes, playing, whatever, swimming in the summer, baseball on the street, whatever.
Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. And yeah, and then of course osmotically getting involved in the family business, like you say, with small cash and as a young lad. But when you decided, do you remember when you decided? Because I guess as long as I've known you, Steve, you've always been in the family business, and and I know you went and did some schooling. But was there ever a thought that you wouldn't do anything like that, or has it just always been in you that you're gonna follow in your father's footsteps, sort of thing?
So I'm going to say, those late teen years when you don't know what the heck you really want to do, and you're still kind of
Yep.
searching. You're like, okay, well, this is a possibility. It's a fallback, but do I really want to do it full time? Maybe do something else. And so my interests at the time were photography and wildlife and history. And I couldn't see myself getting a job as a history anything because it was mainly like teachers. And at the time, little did I know that I wasn't going to really want to teach people. And I didn't see myself trapped inside school, even though you had summers off. I didn't see it happening. Funny, all these years later, I still love history and I actually do some teaching. So here we are. The other thing, like I said, between the photography and wildlife, I said I could see myself being the next like Marlon Perkins or Marty Stouffer, but like living out there in the wilderness, hiking through. Thought occurred to me like you make next to no money, and what female really
Right.
wants to go out with me and go hiking through the woods and trying to raise a family there? So again, you could be you could have been Steve Irwin, and of course, you know, otherwise, that's not like the most productive. So those thoughts eventually faded, and I just kind of got more involved in doing the trees.
So how do you think you got so pragmatic?
Well, mom and dad were both hardworking, but also, pretty bright and pretty pragmatic in most things too. And I guess growing up in the 70s and 80s when the economy was tight, you're like, hey, you just need to make sure you have food on the table, and there it is. If you wanted to have a what used to be considered a traditional life with, house, wife, kids, the typical thing. You kind of need to say, well, how am I gonna make that happen? So
You mentioned history, and it jogged my memory. And your history knowledge is above average, to say the least. Do you apply that and relate it to tree care at all, in the sense of, I guess maybe I'll be more specific. Like, can you see how pivotal moments in history have affected how tree care has evolved in North America, or particularly the U.S.? Like, like I think of Dutch elm disease, for example. Like, that was something, but historically, more uh, politically, has there been any influence that historically, not necessarily politically? Anyways, I always have a problem asking questions.
depending on how you wanted to tackle that
Right,
question, it
right.
could go a couple of different ways, right? So pragmatically, sure, as tools evolved, tree care evolved, right? So we've seen dramatic changes even in your and I lifetime in our careers. I started out with, like I said, that battle axe for a handsaw, and then it's gone to like
Yeah,
silkies and whatever. We started when I started my career. The only chainsaws were Homelight Super XL and a Super EZ, and now there's all these top handled climbing saws. Now there's battery chainsaws. I mean, the technology is some of that, and obviously the tree care
yeah,
practices have changed with it too, right? So when guys used to have to do things the old-fashioned way, they actually made better pruning cuts in the 50s and 60s because you didn't want to remove
right.
that whole collar and make this huge wound with that slow cutting battle axe. When you started dragging chainsaws up in the middle, lion's tailing started occurring, big flush cuts started
Right.
occurring because it
Yep.
was just easy and you didn't have to know anything. And you were working easier,
Yep.
so you were making terrible cuts. Um, so historically, yeah, I mean you can follow the technology. Um, you can follow the diseases. I mean, if you go,
And what about politically, the other way?
well, politically too, sure. I mean, somebody had a meme up the other day. I mean, it's ironic but true, right? So, what happened, like in the 70s and 80s, it was glamorous to say the least
Right.
to plant trees. Take your kids out. It's Arbor Day is coming up on next.
Right.
It's Friday, right? Arbor Day is Friday. Today is Earth Day, actually, right? So hey, so you have these things, and you're planting trees. You're caring for the environment. Now we people going the other way, and they are, hey, I'm worried about hazards. I'm worried about risk. I want to clear cut pretty much anything that's old, right? So you're not preserving anything. The education is going completely the other way. Now people want to cut down 100-year-old oak trees and line their property with arborvitaes, or neighbor haters, as my one friend calls them. It's like, I just want to like block the neighbor. Like, well, dude, what are you doing? That's not like really a tree. That's not what you need to do. And then we're clearing literally fields of trees for mosquito pits for drainage, right? That never actually drains. So now you've got these basins that hold all kinds of water. Meanwhile, the 2 acres of trees next door are perfectly dry. You have no issues that's whatsoever. And then you clear, like, I don't know, I've seen
Right.
places where they're clearing 100 acres of trees to put in solar panels. So we're putting in plastic to
Right.
save the planet. No, the trees are saving the planet. You don't need to save the planet. It drives me insane. So yeah, that's political and historical. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a fair thing, because trees are quite politically correct, like you say, in the sense of saving the planet and so on. And that is quite a interesting topic, even as far as how much trees give us oxygen. Even that's always an interesting, like, if you look at the actual facts of it. I mean, they do, but not to the extent that some of us think. I don't know what, if you've ever researched that part of it, as far as how much oxygen trees provide us.
Well, yeah, I mean, whether you're going by the pound or by the whatever, I mean, and a lot of it comes from the rainforest. But actually, yes, more oxygen is produced by algae and plankton in the ocean. But hey, I mean, but it's still, you need it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. And we had Don Blair on the show a while earlier on last year, and he made a comment about the state of affairs with climbers, and how, well, workers. Shouldn't just focus on climbers, but where people are, you have a lot of Well, maybe it's just perceived this way because of the internet and social media. But people that they're not staying at a company, getting mentored and working along. They learn enough to climb well, and all of a sudden they're an expert and off working for whoever. Have you experienced that as an employer, or do you experience it as a trend in the industry, talking about things changing?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent. Obviously, I mean, I'm thankful. We've been lucky and blessed in a lot of ways because we do have some good guys and they've been around for a long time. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We just actually had our first employee in December that retired
Wow.
from Aspen. Not like, not quit, not moved on to another career, not, hey, my body's too old. So he was with us for 35 years and he retired.
Excellent.
Again, now we've certainly had plenty of transient arborists and people that, just like in any career, like it's parts for now. Like some folks in any career
Right.
stick around for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like they're old watch. They're not sticking around for the whole career. You can speak to that culturally, politically, whatever else.
Hmm.
Like I said, you also have some of the guys that do always, get to a certain level and they're looking to do something, whether it's different or they just think the grass is greener on the other side and they move on. Not that you want to see that, but it does happen quite a bit.
Yeah, do you think it happens any? Do you think it's just more or less the way it always was, or is it different nowadays?
Well, when you're younger, you don't really know. So, but at the same time, when you look back on 40 plus years and you see the guys that were here and how
Yeah.
long were they here and where did they go after that? There were guys in the industry that had the same problems, the same
Hmm.
baggage, the same, life situations that moved on quicker. And then you had other guys that were more stable. Um, yeah, how many guys have you run to, like, from other careers, like even doing an estimate, right? And the guy says, "Oh, when I was in college, I did tree work over the summer," that kind of thing. You run into a lot of it where they think of it as
Right.
a job, but not a career. Um, and I mean, it's unfortunate, but I don't think a lot of our profession did a real good job of promoting that to young people. Like you can actually make a living, and it doesn't have to be killing yourself. And now with the machines, my goodness, I mean, these kids today have no idea. Hey, when you had a 12-inch chuck and duck and you moved every piece of wood 3, 4 times by hand with a wheelbarrow, you had to dice up. When I was younger, I put that sucker with an axe so I could stack a truck so I could fit and fit more. It was like it was playing Tetris in the back of the dump truck.
Yeah, well, I think that that's definitely true. The technology in that, and yeah, it was harder because of the different technology. Yeah, we're on a different scale, I suppose you could say. Although there's probably still companies. I guess it's like the evolution of things. Anyone starting out and all they have is they manage to buy an old trailer and they get a chainsaw and they know how to climb. That's a lot of people do that, right? And they're still maybe experiencing a lot of that that type of work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that gets old quick. And like I said, now with everybody with, mini skid steers and log trucks and grapple saws, and like, you're like, oh my gosh. So, it's hard, but it's not that hard. I mean,
Yeah, interesting. Steve, it just made me think for some reason when I talked about everyone starting or people starting with a trailer. How did Aspen start exactly? Like, what caused it to start in the first? Like your dad wasn't born into tree care, I don't think.
so my grandfather and my great uncle did work for Asplund.
Okay. Oh,
Um, so after World War II, they came home and they did many different jobs, like a lot of them. They worked for Asplund and were on a crew.
okay.
So they, they were down south, and actually, my great uncle worked for Asplund and was actually electrocuted working for them and died.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So my father would, often tell that story when we do some trainings and talk about EHAP and, just working in proximity to lines and all that kind of stuff. So when we do our safety trainings, that is the story that often gets told.
Wow. So his brother you're talking about, your uncle.
No, my father's uncle, my great uncle, it was my grandfather's brother.
Oh, okay. Your father's dad's brother.
Yes, his uncle. Yep.
Wow. Well, that would have made a definite impact. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but it didn't scare him away. So he did his thing, and at that point, the he grew up as a teenager, started climbing, worked for another guy that, again, like many of them, I mean, Asplund and Bartlett started, I don't know how many spawn off tree companies over the last 100 years, you know.
Correct. Yeah.
So this other guy by the name of Jimmy Longo was doing tree work, starting his own business, and doing it on weekends and nights. And so my grandfather, my father went and do some stuff, and that's between Jimmy and another guy. Got taught my dad how to climb,
Okay.
and so on weekends and whatever, he would do that. And when he got old enough, he went to work at Asplund and what have you. But was typical in the 60s and 70s, they would oftentimes get laid off in the winter, especially when the winters were actually winter. We didn't have much of it
Right.
the last couple of years here. But when you had those winters and then they would lay you off, um, he was working for two other companies at the time. And in 1976, it was the Carter years. And my father kind of sat there one night with a buddy of his and my mom and said, you know, I can lay myself off. The hell with it. Why do I need to work for these guys? I can, if we're not going to work all winter, I'll just do something on my own. I'll lay myself off.
Yeah.
So Groundhog's Day of 1976, so February 2nd, they decided in the kitchen that we're going to make a go of it and start our own thing,
Wow.
and thus we was begun.
So did it did they invest in a chipper straight away and stuff like that, or was it like a truck and hand bombing like a lot of us?
No, no. So he bought a used dump truck, 1968,
Yeah.
I think it was, Chevy dump truck, an old Asplund truck, and had like a crew box in the back
Yeah.
and whatever. And then I think it was I can't remember the year, 57 or 58 truck and duck chipper, 12-inch.
Right.
And that was the first, the first truck, Big Orange, they called it. And everything had names back then too. The first bucket was Betsy, and the dump truck was Big Orange. And yeah, we had them all. And so we had our first couple trucks and started, and we had black and orange were the colors because hey, guess what? A, the truck didn't need to be repainted that way, and B, people did see Asplund trucks around, so they would know, oh, that's the guys. That must be them. And of course, Asplund didn't have a phone number back then. Now they have one. Every time somebody's looking for payroll issues or wants to be hired, we get somebody from like, Georgia or Atlanta or I don't know, God, somewhere down south. And they're like, yeah, I was looking for a job. It's like, you must be calling for Asplund. We are in New Jersey,
Right.
and I don't think you're looking for us because it's a long commute, buddy. So we still get some of that occasionally.
Okay. So is that how the name kind of got chose? Because just so it kind of like, I mean, the colors look the same, it sound the same, or was there other reasons?
So there was obviously, so he was looking for a tree, didn't want it to be named after himself, didn't want, like, Chisholm Tree Care or Steve's Tree Care or anything like that. So there was the name, which also sounded like Asplund. And back then, everybody might not realize, but you didn't have Google. So kids, you had to go to the yellow pages and you were first in the phone book. So as a result, we
Ah,
were
okay.
first in the phone book, sounded like Asplund. The colors stayed the same. Now those colors only stayed the same from 76 when they started, and we switched over in 85. So that's when we kind of went more to the blue and white.
Yeah.
So we go from the orange and black. You know.
Yeah. I remember it as blue and white. That's my recollection, obviously, is always knowing it as blue and white. Yeah, that's pretty smart. Like ASPE is ahead of ASPL.
But they weren't in the phone book. Like I said, they were at a PA and they were only doing line clearance. They weren't doing, residential and commercial tree care in our area at all.
Right, right, right. So it wasn't even competitive. It was more of recognition and piggyback off of recognition. Yeah, 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 yeah. Which is smart, you're probably the first company that's ever done that, and maybe
I
the
don't
only
I
one.
don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. But that's all right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting because I've always wondered a little bit about that because there's not a whole lot of aspen where you are.
We have aspen. We have them, but it's not a dominant species by any means. No.
No, I didn't think so. It's not like in Colorado. That makes sense for a company in Colorado to be called Aspen.
Yeah.
But that makes sense, and that's an interesting, and I also find it fascinating how, particularly family businesses, and if they have young kids, end up naming all their stuff, and giving everything names, and you still identify those trucks with those names, and I can almost see the kid in you, how what age were you when you called those trucks those names?
Well, like when we first started, I mean, I would have been maybe, let's see, that was the beginning of the year. So I was like 7 when they got them. So
Big
big
Orange. It
arm.
made sense, right?
Yeah. But I mean, the adults at the time were what named them. I didn't name them, but yeah.
Yeah, of course, of
And
course. But the kids, you're going to remember them. So, has there been any posterity in those vehicles? Are going to like find a '58 dumper and fix it up, put it in the front yard or something like that?
no, no. Actually, we knew who we sold the chipper to. So I mean, I kind of I don't think he disposed of it. It's probably rusting in his nursery at this point. So it might still be there in pieces, but yeah.
Right, an old Chuck and Duck, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, it was an old Asp. Like I said, it was a 57 or 58 Asplund Chuck and Duck. That was it.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty progressive though. For I don't know for you're really getting into it if you go take the step to start and buy a chipper. Because a lot of guys will start with a trailer just cost wise, right? But that shows true commitment, and it definitely is anybody that's hand bombed trailers for a season or two. I don't think you ever find anyone appreciating a chipper more.
Okay.
When you've had that experience for a bit. Um, Interesting. And what that there's not a lot of companies. There's a few, but like to have an employee with you that retires at 35 years with the same company, it definitely speaks something to what you guys have as far as a culture at Aspen. What do you think? How do you guys achieve that? Where you have been able to build a company that has kept an individual gainfully employed that didn't want to leave and stayed for that long
Well, I
without
mean,
giving up trade secret.
yeah, I mean, I don't know that it is a trade secret. I mean, it's, you treat them like family and they are kind of like a member of the family. So, I mean, him and his family would be over after work. I mean, they swam in the pool. We had barbecues. We went on a couple of vacations together. Like, they generally enjoyed hanging out together. Him and my father, mom and his wife. Um,
Mm.
Actually, when they got old enough, his two sons worked with us for a number of years each as well. They moved on to do some other things and whatever. Sort of still in tree care, and then also in like line. He wanted to be a lineman, the one guy, so he was still climbing and running a bucket, but he was
Mhm.
working for the electric company. But yeah, I mean, it's you know we laughed together, we fought together, we pretty much did family things. So he was kind of like a wayward uncle, whatever.
Yep. Steve, and I've got to know you best through the ISA, really, and other associations like the Society of Commercial Arboriculture. Um, how do you? And I know that you've been also very active in New Jersey in the Arborist Association, you and your family. Uh, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about the state of affairs with credentialing and trade associations, TCI, ISA, New Jersey Arborist Association. How are things? How are things? What's the historical progression, and how are things at, and where are they going, in your opinion?
Boy, all right. So how do you line that one up? Where the historical progression from which association we want to start with? I don't know.
Well, maybe you could just talk about them and blend them all together, or you could pick one because I don't want to make it political totally, but I'm you have you have a pretty depth of knowledge that a lot of people wouldn't have in that whole scope, quite a view of it, and not just from a outsider looking in. You've been involved very in on committees and very active. I mean, you're single-handedly have I think almost sustained SCA for a lot of years. Like you've been very active and supportive. So you obviously have a reason for it, and you've seen a lot of change.
As far as the reason for it is, you just want to be the best you can be, and you want everybody else to come along, and you want your profession to be as good as it can possibly be. That's why most of us that I guess get involved and do the things that we do. It's because we want to make it better for ourselves and for everybody behind us. As far as credentialing goes, in New Jersey, we have a pretty rich history because we have the oldest and toughest exam in the nation. It started in 1940. So right when World War II was kicking off, they decided they wanted to start a certification, and we started the New Jersey Certified Tree Experts. It was a state law, and it carried on for a great many decades. And over the years, there was a push to make it a license, and several times taken before the Assembly and the Senate, and in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and was shot down on several occasions. Early 2000s, right after a couple of storms, and then again after Sandy, there was a whole bunch of push again because at one point we had like 12 fatalities in New Jersey alone doing within a year time frame.
Wow.
So you're like, that's way too many. Statistically, that was extremely high. And again, it was lack of training. It was lack of other things. So we went back to the legislature again and said, listen, we had kind of perfected it through a couple other legislative initiatives. We hired a lobbyist. We kind of knew the process at that point, who to go to, who would be supportive. And we basically told them, listen, this is going on. We're looking at this from a couple of different angles. It's not to be restrictive to people doing their job, because obviously we want people to do their job. We want them to be safe. At the end of the day, you want people to go home because they have something waiting for them. It's more important than their job. You guys have passed laws throughout the state to make it so that you have to be licensed to install sprinkler systems. You have made it a license to do nails in a nail salon. To the best of my knowledge, neither one of them have ever had a fatality. We've had 12 in about a 12-month period. It's also, if you go to like the Better Business Bureau and some of the other organizations that deal with customer service, tree care is one of the highest complaints that they ever get from anybody, where somebody took advantage of some little blue-haired lady that they said they were going to come back. They never did. They damaged my stuff. I paid them and they didn't come back. So it was a consumer affairs thing too.
Wow.
So anyway, long story short, it took a few years because nothing moves fast in the halls of government. But the legislation was passed. We got a license in, and it took a few years after that, even after it had passed, for us to be able to enforce it, because again, in Trenton was kind of dragging their feet and not allowing us to enforce that which we had already created by law. So it's been active now since about 2017, I guess, 2018, where we've been able to enforce it. We have compliance officers. They're required to get CEUs. And again, it's not to be onerous, but to make sure that guys are actually learning something. Because, you and I know people that are like, hey, I got a certification. And then you haven't seen them at a class in 20 or 30 years since. Well, I got my license, and then then they just disappear and fade in the background. So
and and how does and is ISA connected with that, or is that I?
So ISA, when they decided way back in the day, hey, we'd like to do a certification. What's this thing going on you guys have in Jersey? So they did come out. They had a big investigation meeting, and they kind of looked at what we did, and they took some of that, and they went to Maryland, and they went to Massachusetts, and they were able to take some of the program, but they didn't make it obviously as hard for different reasons. They don't have an outdoor portion of the exam. ISA's exam takes like 2 hours. This is like 6 plus. There's some differences. Obviously, it's not codified into law. Back in the day, we didn't need CEUs, so that was all part of it when ISA started it. And then, of course, they branched off and did municipal and utility and different, specifications, which is great. Um, but again, it's kind of at a different level. So here in New Jersey, it is kind of connected. So if you wanted to, let's say, sit for the licensed tree expert law and take your licensed tree expert exam, you can have credentials. Let's say you moved
Uh-huh.
in from other states. If you're a CTSP, you get a couple points towards the license. If you have ISA, we'll give you a couple points towards. If you have a pesticide license, they'll give you a couple points.
Right.
So you can kind of be grandfathered in and not have to sit for the written exam. But the outdoor exam you have to still take
Okay.
because nobody else has an outdoor exam.
No, that's right. Wow. So, and that exam's administered at various, is it like an annual event and like people sign up and wait to get in, or like,
So it used to be only once a year. So if you failed, it was a long 365-day wait to take it again.
wow.
So, your envelope would come in the mail and it was like, is it the heavy envelope or is it the light envelope? Did I get invited to the dinner? Is this congratulations? Am I having a beer to celebrate or am I drowning my sorrows? I don't know. Um, so now it is offered several times a year. You could take the written, like, I think it's about 9 times a year. The outdoor is only offered like 3 times, but it used to be only once. So I
Hmm.
advise people now, if you're going to take it on the first one, because if you fail, you can do it again this year. You don't want to have that long wait. It's a long wait.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay. I always thought Connecticut had the oldest or the first, the Connecticut Tree Protection Association. I thought they were the oldest, but
Yeah, we
you
beat them.
beat them by.
We beat them on the exam. We beat them on the exam part. That's it. They had tree wardens and whatever else, but yeah, this is like the oldest license and certification.
Okay, because they had a panel back like in that era in the 40s where you had to basically were questioned verbally for 4 hours or something by a jury of your peers, basically.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So how would you like to do that today, right? Being asked questions. I mean, the oral, sometimes some guys actually do better at the oral exam, honestly, but
Oh
I
yeah. Now, do you remember when ISA had the code of ethics thing and you had to have another member sign you on to join?
yeah. Yeah.
You know what? I remember that caused a bit of a hubbub.
Yeah, like this case, that's not important
Yeah,
anymore.
well, it caused a bit of a hubbubaloo when they banned it, when they got rid of that, and they said they had to get rid of it for political reasons. I guess like it was too easily to bias someone, like someone could feel that they weren't liked and therefore they'd be shunned out of the association or something like that. Did you ever find that? Like I found that a kind of a lame excuse person. I thought it did. I thought it was quite an interesting concept that they had there. Like, and I remember having to get my application signed, and the people ask me a couple questions, say, yeah, I'll sign your application, and you know, like, do you think that could have been kept up, or is it just to me, it was political. I don't know if you'd agree.
No, no, I agree. I mean, obviously, in this day and age, I mean, everybody's feelings are more important than reality. I mean, either you're ethically sound and you have some guidelines and morality, or it's okay for you to just hack and top and do terrible things, or take advantage of your employees, your customers. I mean, what's the point of having ethics or not? I mean, some people are going to live by them and some people are not.
Yeah, it's interesting. They left. That's been. I want to say they stopped that in the mid '90s or something, didn't they already? Or even, I don't think it made it into the
I don't
2000s.
know, like the older you get, those dates kind of blend together. So I don't know if it was late '90s, early 2000s, but it's more than 20 years ago. I know that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That more than 20 years ago. Yeah, yeah. Well, we call this the Human Forestry Podcast, and I did that. I found it a a neat concept in that forests help one another. They grow in communities. They share resources. They connect in multiple different ways, not only with each other, but with the environment around them and the soil, particularly things in the soil. Um, have you ever thought or drawn parallels in your own personal life, either your your family life or your friends where you've ever thought it's kind of like a forest, or has the trees taught you, helped you be, helped you live, or in life lessons, would you say? And could you share any ways that you relate to that? Or
Very philosophical of you, I got to say. I don't know.
yes, it is. It is. It is.
Uh, so I don't usually personally think of it as a forest, but obviously, there's you know very full well, both of you guys, that this is a very tight knit community, and I usually look at it as more as like family, more so than a
Mhm.
forest. But I guess you could kind of analyze it a forest, but I guess you could kind of analyze it and say, hey, here's our root system, and you guys are kind of like the support, and you guys are like our branches, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I certainly our tree community is it's a unique industry in so many ways, and when you try to relate that to other people's like, hey, I'm in the pipe fitters union, or hey, I'm a realtor, and we have this conference. I say you guys have never seen a conference that's anything like this, because you guys get together, you go to a class, you do your thing, you have a small group of peers. But I mean, you can come to a conference anywhere in the world, and people are willing to share, whether it's gear, um, tools, advice, their meal. I mean, open it up to your house. Hey, you want to camp in my yard, sleep in my trees. I mean, it's a community that is unlike pretty much any other industry, and I think it's kind of unique, and it's one of the good things I think that does keep those guys that let's say have grown up in the industry or stayed with the industry all those years, kind of motivated, because it's just such a tight knit. I mean, I look forward to it. It kind of energizes me to go to like an expo or an ISA conference or something, where I'm going to see people that I only see 2 3 times a year, and just, hey man, how you doing? How's your life? Let's catch up. And I mean, it's so short, but you can pick up right where you left off.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly right. The it is, a family or a community, but it's, I guess, a hyperbole or symbolically call a forest. But about shows and associations, I know that you've been avidly involved for many years. I haven't been to the international the last few years, and I don't think, have you ever missed one? Missed the big show?
My yeah, in between like those years, but when I first started going, the last one I missed was Oakland in '92.
That's my point.
Yeah. So yeah.
So, what, for people listening that maybe are new to the industry or haven't, been to a show, or don't go frequently, what is it for Steve that makes those things so great? I mean, you shared some of it already, but I mean, you clearly are really dedicated to it.
Well, clearly I don't need the credits, right? So I mean, I get 300,
Exactly.
350 every time I have to renew. So it's not I'm not there for the CEUs. Sure, it's cool to see the toys and the gear and what have you. There's always a couple classes, so if I can go and learn something to make myself better, that's great. At this point, I go more for the business classes because I want to make sure there's something I'm not missing that I can pass on to my guys, make the company better. I mean, there's always something scientific and what have you, but I'm to the point where I'm not climbing anymore, so the gear and the climbing part is not my thing anymore. So I'm more worried about the business side of it. But reality is the networking and just being with those people that I know, I like it, and I admire. Just sitting down over a meal and saying, hey, how's your life? What's going on with the family? And then, so what's going on in your business? And have you made any changes? Is there anything that's really, I guess, moved the needle for you in the last year or two since we last talked? And hey, is there anything that you can share that maybe I can bring home that little piece, or maybe I can supply something back to them.
Yeah. Well, and I think like that, my brain automatically goes to what an example of the forest, where, you know, trees sharing, helping, I don't know if trees have the conversations, but, sensing a tree that that may need extra energy for whatever reason. And that's a whole nother part of the industry, right? When someone gets hurt or someone has an incident within the tree community, a lot of times other tree companies, they're there to help. We just had a kid here. Well, I shouldn't call him a kid, a young arborist that got the trucks got broke into and he lost all his stuff, and someone sent an email out
Yeah.
and he called me the other day and he said, I'm feeling guilty here. He said, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. I'm getting so much stuff sent to me, and I've got more than I've lost.
Hey, then give some
Yeah,
back. That's good. That's fine. Somebody
yeah,
else probably needs it.
that's what I said. He said, like, do I send it back? What should I do? I'm feeling guilty. I said, hey, man, someone else will need it when the time comes. You got stuff to share. But that's something really really cool about the tree care industry, like you say. And I don't know if it's the same in other industries. I just think there's good people everywhere, but clearly our focus, yours even more so than mine. I've been in this 35 plus years. You've been in it your whole life. And I agree. It seems unique to me. It seems very helpful. And for the most part, it doesn't matter whose truck people drive. It doesn't matter what shirt they're wearing. At the end of the day, if they're getting together at an event that's about trees, they're going to talk like they're old friends for the most part. And they'll argue like they're old friends too, because it can get quite heated.
Oh
But
yeah,
but it
sometimes.
doesn't make people stop coming. It's not the type of banter that creates enemies. It just, if anything, it creates deeper connections. It's been my experience. I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's. I mean, I don't care where you go, right? There's good and bad people everywhere, and but I guess by and large, when you go to those events at that level, at that scale, 90 to 95% of those people easily just really good salt of the earth people, and they are the
Yeah,
people we call family. I mean,
right.
are there fly by nights and dirtbags and people that are like, whatever, sure. But I mean, most of those guys, they're not really invested because they're just about, making money and just doing their thing. And they don't get involved
Yeah,
and they don't learn and they don't improve themselves or their guys or their. So yeah, but most
yeah,
most of the people we meet at these events are, they're just great people.
yeah, yeah. Tony, you've weighed in a couple once, I think, on our call today, but you're in a similar background as Steve, almost with the size of the company of your brother's company, and so on, and your brother's in the tree care industry, as is Steve's brother, and um, I'm just curious what has been going through your mind as you've been listening to us talk about trees and family business and so on. If you're drawing parallels or make, I've seen you smirk and smile a few times, so I'm curious what's going on.
Oh yeah, the stories are, growing up in family business. I don't know any other, I imagine it's the same almost in any business, but when you add the personalities and the individualness of tree people into a family business, it's got to be funny. I don't know what it's like to grow up in a family full of doctors, but I bet it's not near as much fun as growing up as a family full of tree guys.
Yeah, probably.
It's a bit. What I don't think, and in Steve's comments, I don't think people realize, like he said, the community at a certain level is very, very tightly knit. And these are conversations I've had to have, with employees that have worked for us. I'm like, that have maybe not made the best decisions. I'm like, you have to understand how at a certain level, everybody knows everybody else in this industry. So don't burn bridges, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I don't think a lot of people realize, and I know that Steve's been involved in a lot of it, just what goes into, like, for crane use in arboriculture, that exists because of, men like Steve that have done a lot of work on the back end, that legislative end, that I want to say administrative end, because of that. And without that, we wouldn't be using trees in arboriculture, because, maybe you can discuss that a little bit, that
Cranes.
everyone just kind of assumes that trees and cranes were just a perfect match, and it's always just been joyous and happy. But that's really, really not true. I mean, there's been some very, very big
Mm,
legislative battles
good point.
around, because cranes are used in every industry. And I don't think people quite understand that. And it'd be great to get, your view on that, Steve, and how that kind of came about.
Um,
Yeah.
well, mean, they did use them, obviously. Like, it's not like my father wasn't quite the Stone Age, but I mean, they didn't obviously have cranes way back that they were using. When you see some of these old, like, 1900 whatever from Davy and Bartlett and whatever, and you had these guys on like wooden ladders and the whole thing, which is pretty cool. Certainly, we didn't use cranes when I was first in the industry. Um, Probably the first experience I had with any crane work was, I'm going to say, probably around 1990, something like that. I mean, it was pretty late. I'd already been, climbing trees and doing stuff. We didn't do a whole lot of crane work. Dad was like, "Hey, I can get this down. I don't need to worry about, bringing in a crane. We'll just rope it down, do it the old-fashioned way."
Yeah.
And still to this day, we, have other tools, and if you have good climbers and whatnot, we do a lot of the technical rigging without the crane. But we rent them out, probably 2 days a month or so at this point, just for the ones like, why bother killing the guys? Why move all this wood? Why, if you have a tool that can do it, then it's fantastic. But yeah, legislatively, my father actually sits on the ANSI Z133 committee. So he was instrumental in working on the cranes committee with a bunch of other guys. I know Don Blair, I think, was involved. I know some other people that, so without omitting a whole bunch of names and whatnot, they all worked as a committee. How do we get this done? They wanted to ban cranes in tree work because cranes are supposed to pick stuff up off the ground and then put them on top of buildings, not take things apart and then pick them up and bring them down. And there was crane incidents and accidents, and they were trying to avoid that. And I mean, I get it, but there were limitations. So they did fight that. They got some legislation passed. They made sure, that it was being done safely. And, these crane standards have really developed over the last, really, what, 20, 25 years. And of course now the machinery itself has evolved with grapple saws and all these other things that, we use and we think are second nature, but they're really reasonably new machines in our industry for our purposes. Um, what else about the cranes? Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm on the A300 standard, but not the Z. So my father had more to do with any of the safety stuff. I sit on the A300, so that's the pruning, the cabling, the science.
Yeah. Well, I thought New Jersey was one of the first states to actually put in legislation that, there was ways like that it was technically legal, even on a legal standpoint, to work off like using cranes and trees and to actually lift, like ride the hook, so to speak. Not necessarily ride the hook, but to use a train to get people in trees. Wasn't that New Jersey?
Yeah, we did that. We had to go before our state, and we had to get a separate license for crane operators. So we do again, same thing. We actually did a crane training video. Can't believe it's 2000 already. That was 2000. So we have this really old video. We had 3 cranes on the same site set up at Princeton University. We're taking down this lightning struck tulip poplar, and it's not often you can get 3 cranes on the same site. So we had the road shut down. Everybody was involved, and we were shooting video and tearing these things apart. So one crane was actually had mark on the hook, and the other one was taken, dismantled the tree, and then this other crane was working kind of mix and match, taking down this other tree. But yeah, it was an educational video at the time, and that's when we were working with the state and trying to get a license and trying to say, okay, listen, you guys are trying to ban us from using cranes, and unfortunately, we've been doing this for years and years, and there are safe ways to do it, and that's when we started developing the guidelines, and then eventually, the Z133 committee took it over and tried to get that going, so nationally they wouldn't have the same interference in working with OSHA, and yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was even adopted, or it's been used as a template or as an example in many of the states after that.
Yeah, I don't know how many, because like after it became a national thing, I don't know if they're using what we did to start, but it's been tweaked so many times.
How are things going on the A300?
Um, Pretty good. I mean, the biggest thing, I guess, is for those that aren't in the know, it was always done in 10 different parts, and it was just consolidated into one big book. So now it's released, and each phase, as they are now called, will be assessed still on that 5-year cycle, but we'll be doing 2 a year just like we always have. But it'll come out pretty much and be revised every 10 years as a full unit, as a full book. So that is now available through IFA and
Okay.
TCI. Um, Not too many major changes, thankfully, this time. The biggest thing is consolidating everything and changing a few definitions and that kind of stuff. But the standards themselves didn't get a major overhaul this time, thankfully, because the last big one with pruning really, threw a lot of, I guess, wrenches into the works, and a lot of people weren't real happy with it. And of course, you're changing terminology. And again, we'll go back to the old age thing here. So, when we started, what was the standard? I don't know. You're going to go prune that tree. What tree? What does it look like? I don't even know. And then what kind of tree is it? I don't know. And then, TCI had come out with, before it actually was NAA, because it wasn't even TCI. Well, you had a class one, a class two, a class
Right.
three, and a class four. Well, what are those?
Yeah.
And then, they finally said, all right, well, we're going to have this ANSI A300. We're going to address that. And we're going to call it, like crown cleaning and thinning and raising. And, I still think some of those terms made sense, but some of them really didn't like them. And now they changed it. And it's like, oh my gosh. So turmoil.
So what are the terms? What are the terms in the A300 now for the different types of pruning? Is it canopy or crown? Is it canopy or crown now?
So they are still talking. Well, again, you're just not using crown clean, crown. And so it's more about branch removal and what kind of system is it? So is it a natural system, which 95% or more is, or are you doing something weird like topiary or polarding? And then once
Uh,
you get into your system, it's what kind of branches are being removed? Deadwood only, crossed and rubbing branches, what diameter? So you can find yourself writing a lot more, but it it's more
okay.
detailed and descriptive, but at the same time, for the estimator, it's a lot more writing.
And I think it was Davy that, or maybe not. But I thought Davy always had the class 1, 2, 3, 4 model. That was something that they still use. I think, don't they?
I don't really know for sure, but it's quite possible they're still using it.
Yeah. Which had to do with the size of wood you would remove and how much. So if it was a class 1, every piece of dead wood, would be removed. If it was a class 4, only up to, if it was bigger than 2 inches, you'd get rid of it. Otherwise, it stayed or something like that.
Yeah,
I was never trained in it because I actually never did work for Davy, but I wonder, it was something like that. I remember having an
yeah,
employee was working for us, and we always did, I guess, what would have been called the class 1. I was trained that way. Maybe it was altruistic, but we never bid it any different. If we pruned a tree, we pruned it this way, and it was all the deadwood would come out. Um, and I remember having a guy on the crew going, "What are you doing? Like, is this a class 1 or what? Like, it's only bid for like a class 3." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Well, you don't have to remove every little piece." It's like, "Well, we do, and we don't ever not." And he's like, "Well, okay." That it was a shift for him thinking, and I couldn't understand why anyone
yeah,
would do it any differently. Well, I guess it's based on cost. If you want to pay for it, we'll do it like that, which, as I thought about it, made sense. It makes business sense because I don't know if you've ever found that, Steve, or how you guys do it at Aspen. And I'm not trying to have you give up any secrets here, but I was a terrible estimator. Like, I was the worst because I hated charging people for doing what I loved, and I wanted to do that tree so bad that oh man, I got in trouble so many times. I basically had to stop bidding. And
yeah.
and I would make everything had to be done just like, no, no, there's one out there in the end. You got it. It's good. Like, really, you got to get every single piece. Yeah. Like, that was me, right? Kind of thing. And I was trained that way. How do you balance that? Like, that's not really the best business model.
Yeah, well, you obviously have to have some kind of guidelines to give the crew. Nowadays they label it, right? So like there's a guy with ADD and he has to get every little twig. So sometimes you have to get those people and say, no, no, easy now. Read the description. 2 inch and larger, 2 inch and larger. Not every piece. And then you have other ones that are, again, they're doing artsy work and they want to do it. And again, if you're bidding it that way, then you have a couple other guys that are like, yeah, I just
Yeah.
run through the middle. No, no, you actually have to get out there. No, please go read the specification.
You mentioned ADHD. You mentioned ADHD, and that makes me laugh because I probably resemble that comment. How much is that a trait that's common in tree people, or is it just me?
No, no, I think again, no, like so in the tree world, what was it? Oak man and Uke man, right? So one's the artsy, I gotta get this, we're gonna be finesse. The other one's like, I just want to kill stuff and bomb it out. So yeah,
The middle
like I said, we're
path.
just showing our age here, guys. That's all. We're just showing our age.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But some of the kids are gonna have to go back and look that up and say, what's an oak man and a uke man? I don't even know. What is that? Yeah,
Well, we've decided that we need to get Don back on the show to give us the full rendition and orientate us a little bit with the, I found out at a recent conference he was at speaking in, he's kind of doing rounds again, talking about history. And he had made, I didn't know this, I don't know if you know this, but he made a cartoon. Did you ever hear the cartoon? What was it called, Tony? What was the name of the guy? Super.
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah, he
Oh,
had like a comic book, like a superhero, and I can't remember
yeah.
the.
Full-on comic book with a comic series made of a doctor. Oh, how did it go? And it was a villain in it, and it was a villain that had turned a villain, but he used to be a really good tree guy. Then he got disenchanted. Something happened to him. He got infected. He got diseased by DED somehow. All these interesting twists, like it was only Don could do.
nice.
I didn't even know he had it. They had voices recorded for it. They did audio plays, wasn't it, Tony? Old radio type stuff, or was it in the comic? Anyways, there's some really good history there, stuff I didn't even know about. So I want to see if we can resurrect some of that. But the
Yeah,
Oakman Ukeman, yeah, the Oakman Ukeman is a great way of putting it, and I think that still exists. I think that analogy of you've got the altruistic arborist that, the oakmen that just, no, we only use organic fertilizers, and we use compost tea. None of that, nothing else will do, and we if you don't have a secateurs in your harness, well, there's something wrong. And we prefer to use climbers only because it's better for the tree, but always friction management devices. We're never stripping the bark. That concept versus, here, give me an energy drink and a top handle saw and I'll get her done. Yeah, and I
yeah,
prefer to use the bucket, but if I don't have to, I got spurs. The two
yeah.
spectrums, right? Oh man. I have to say, like Don would always say, he's an oak man with uke tendencies. Um, I just felt really lucky that the company that I started in, because they were Shigoites. They didn't even use spurs for anything, including removals, because they just decided spurs would just lead to, being used in the wrong tree. And so I didn't even know how to, I learned all the Shigo way right from the start in 1988. And that was just the way it was. And it wasn't until 3-4 years later I went to another company that was a lot older, established company, that I got exposed to different things that, and it was a real shocker, because everything I was doing was kind of aligned with school and college, and I wonder what would have happened if I would have ended up at a spur using treetop and son of a gun, and I might still be doing it today.
Always a possibility, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's good. So, I'm glad you got the right info to start with.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Steve, for giving up some of your time. I know that you've got a lot going on, like any private guy that runs his own business. There's never a free moment. So I want to truly recognize the gift that you've given us, because it is a value. You made time for us. So thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. Good to see both of you.
Yeah. Tony, anything you want to say to Steve in closing?
No. Thanks for coming on. Like I said, I know you're super busy, and just for making the time. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, man.